Sabres win in Boston, which for me is a couple of positive things on the Buffalo end of things and a couple of negative things on the Boston end of things that have me feeling pretty good here on a Tuesday. Let's recap the game. Also, Lindy Ruff making some interesting comments to me and Jeremy White on WGR this morning about head hitting in the NHL that I want to get to. All that ahead here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
You're Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including our YouTube channel. Watch the show there if you'd like and subscribe. And also be sure to check us out on our text club. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here after a Sabre win over the Boston Bruins. A lot to get to on today's show, from more Sabre standing up for teammates, which has been happening a lot recently, to what is the future of the Boston Bruins, because they look totally cooked. Get to that today as well, along with other things here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. And as always, if you want to check us out on social media, I'm on Twitter at Sneaky Joe Sports and at Locked On Sabres, and on Blue Sky at Sneaky Joe. We're available to you there as well. So we'll get to a lot today on the show. As I mentioned, we'll talk about the matchup against the Bruins and how it went and what's going to happen with Boston going forward, because I'm kind of finally excited to... I don't want to say I'm right about the Bruins, because this is the one year that I finally said I'm done picking them to fall apart. I had been doing it for years. The one year I finally decided I'm not doing it anymore is the year they finally fell down. So I was early. I wasn't wrong. I was early. Michael Berry from The Big Short, I believe that's the line from. So get to that today. One thing I wanted to start with, though, before we get into the game, because we have spent a ton of time on this show, a bunch of episodes throughout the season, and a lot of attention on Elias Pettersson, the star center of the Vancouver Canucks, who had been on the trade market, and obviously now the deadline is passed, and maybe that'll fire up again in the summer. We'll see. But for now, he's in Vancouver, and we've obviously stopped talking about him. But I saw a quote from Rick Tocchet, the Canucks general manager, that I wanted to start things off with today, just to throw it by everybody as a reminder. We should be talking about this guy again when the season ends and we get into the offseason and we start to have to think of big ideas for the Buffalo Sabres. And I think Pettersson's going to come back up. Tocchet says today, his own head coach said that Elias Pettersson likes to regroup and slow the game down, but they want him to play a more North style and are trying to reprogram his brain. That's a quote from the head coach today, reprogramming the guy's brain. Saw that from a Vancouver Canucks account this morning on Twitter. And that's a terrible idea, right? I mean, what's wrong with the way he plays? It's worked effectively for him in the past a lot, as someone that wants to slow the game down and use his size, because he's a pretty big, long frame, maybe not like a thick, body, but he is a lengthier guy, and he's got amazing hands. He's got good edge work, good skating. When you watch him, it actually is kind of reminiscent of Dahlin. Dahlin is not the fastest skater, but he's one of the best skaters, because he can cut, he can stop on a dime, he can start again, and Pettersson's got some of that. So I don't know why you'd want to change it, reprogram the guy's brain. It sounds like, actually the same account that tweeted out that quote followed up and tweeted, Tocchet trying to turn Pettersson into a third-line checking center. And that is kind of what it sounds like. And I really wonder if that's all this is in Vancouver. You know, we can speak from experience here in Buffalo. We lived through Ralph Kruger. We all know as Sabre fans that one coach can do enough damage on an individual to completely ruin his game. Ralph Kruger did it with Jeff Skinner. He did it with Rasmus Dahlin. He did it with a bunch of other individuals. Not everybody. He didn't do it with Eichel, but definitely Middlestat, another one. Guys that he just had no clue how to get the most out of and actively hurt. Skinner is the one for that. Skinner and Dahlin. He actively hurt their games because he tried to make them into something that they were not. He tried to make Skinner into an all-around two-way player, or at least he asked him to be that in order to get minutes. He asked Dahlin to stay put on the blue line, not move all around the ice, be more stagnant. He asked Dahlin to be a player that he isn't, and it was horrible. And that might be what's happening in Vancouver. Rick Tocchet is maybe ruining Elias Pettersson, and somebody's got to get in there and save him. If Tocchet doesn't get fired, which is possible, I guess, in the first place. But somebody go save him. You know, Sabres. That'd be great. We'll talk about it more in the offseason, though. Let's get to last night's victory over Boston. Fun game. Back and forth. I mean, not a lot of big name offensive players on either side of the ice. The Bruins, because that's just kind of how they're built right now. And the Sabres, of course, because they were missing Yuri Kulik, JJ Peterka, and Josh Norris. The lineup looked like a preseason lineup. It looked like, let's throw as many fourth-line grinders into one lineup that we can with Brett Murray and Tyson Kozak and Lafferty and Malenstein. And, I mean, Greenway is better than those guys, but even he's the same style, and he's on line one. Thought Greenway played well last night, by the way. So, not a lot of dynamic offensive ability, but Sabres played their game. Lindy Ruff talked about it this morning that, hey, they kind of knew the lineup. They knew the lineup didn't have some of their skilled guys, so they played a more defensively responsible game. They tried to keep the Bruins smothered and not allow a lot of chances, and I think they accomplished that. Again, it helps when the Bruins don't have anybody on the team that has more than 41 points on the season, except for David Pastrnak. That helps. But I do think the Sabres played the style they wanted to, and I think that it worked effectively well. So when you look at kind of the numbers of the game, pretty even. Although, to be fair, at 5-on-5, there were some power plays mixed in. The Sabres got 2 power play goals, which was kind of amazing because I didn't think they looked great on either power play, but whatever, man. You got the results. 2 power play goals. Very low event game. Not a lot happening. The Sabres on the night, 5-on-5, had 43 shot attempts. That's not many. The Bruins had 30. And if you are wondering for comparison, like 40 shot attempts is actually the, fifth, no, a little higher than that. But for instance, there's a couple games down here. I'm looking at the whole Sabre season. Like they had 19 shot attempts in a game at 5-on-5. They've had some low ones. But for instance, against Vegas, they had 56. They had been above 40 every game going back to the Carolina game at the end of February. But there's a 68 in here, a 62, a 56. A lot of their games are higher, at least by a little bit. So low event game, 30 shot attempts allowed. That was the number I was looking at. The 4th fewest the Sabres have allowed at 5-on-5 all year to an opponent was this Bruins game. So they did a great job. They did a great job defensively. Now, I thought Power, Dahlin, Byram really controlled the game. Couple of things I want to pick out from this game, though. 1, Owen Power, 3-point night. Thought he controlled the game really well. Made excellent passes. Good job on that final goal. Just, the clock's running down. Nobody was really moving around. The power play hadn't been working. I don't know what Seth Appert had drawn up on the whiteboard because they kind of just all stood still. Didn't even feel like they were executing a play. So Power says, all right, nothing's happening here. I'm going to throw it to the net. And Alex Tuch gets the deflection, and you win the hockey game. So good on him. Thought Ryan McLeod played great. Ryan McLeod playing 23 minutes, 57 seconds of ice time. That was a career high. He was on that power play. That guy is stick handling 1,000,000 miles an hour. It looks good. He is fast. I love Ryan McLeod's game right now. Like, I'm kind of falling in love with him as a player. He does everything you want in a third line center. He is great defensively. He is the fastest player on the ice as long as Connor McDavid is not on the ice. He is scoring, and I think that will regress. He's at above 20% shooting percentage. That will regress, but I'm good with that, man. Like, he's throwing assists all around. He gets one on the power goal in the second period. He's got a 6-game, not a 6-game point streak, but he has 6 points in his last 6 games. There was a multiple point game in there. I'm loving McLeod. He's winning faceoffs at a 52% rate. Loving his game. And I thought he was awesome last night. One of the best players on the ice, I thought, from beginning to end. He did not get a star of the game. I would have given him a star of the game. I would have gone Power 1, McLeod 2. And it actually went Tuch 1, Morgan Geekie 2. So that was a little bit interesting. Now, one other positive, and I want to get to one small negative that I observed from this game. And then we'll get to the Bruins. Positive. The Sabres continue to defend teammates. And I'm not really surprised by it, given who the individuals are. Nikita Zadorov, who is doing his best Zdeno Chara impression in Boston. He's got the bully part of it down. He's a bully. He's not that great. He's playing as their number 1 defenseman right now. He's not that, but that's where the Bruins lineup is. He's got to be their number 1 defenseman. So Zadorov smacks Tage coming over the middle late. Tage, the puck leaves his stick. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. We're approaching on 3 Mississippi before Zadorov cranks Thompson. Not a dirty hit other than it being late. He hits him in the chest, but it was late. So what do you get? Your best player is on the ice over there on the side, and Jordan Greenway's on the ice. And Jordan Greenway runs over and he fights Nikita Zadorov, who's one of the toughest guys right now in the league. Back-to-back games. Peyton Krebs on Saturday, Jordan Greenway in this game, defending teammates. I want to continue to reiterate the point, though. I do not think that this is as big of a team issue as we probably made it out to be. I probably made it out to be a month ago when the Devils ran Thompson and no Sabre did anything. The more you really look back on that situation, and to me, the more you look back on the season, the more this is not a team-wide problem. It isn't. It's a couple certain individuals. Matthias Samuelson, top of the list. Owen Power, maybe right thereafter. Big guys that you want to do more in those spots. But you tell me a time where Jordan Greenway, any time in the last 3 years, where Jordan Greenway, after Thompson gets hit like that, wouldn't have ran over and fought. Tell me a time that Peyton Krebs, any time in the last 3 years, wouldn't have run over there and fought. Sure, Cousins had his moments where he didn't do the job. And again, there are individuals on this team that I think need to be better at it. But I think there are a lot of guys that deserve credit. I think Greenway does, Krebs does, Dahlin does, I think Thompson does. End of the game there are the Bruins. And who was it? It was Kastelik, Mark Kastelik. He slides the puck on Luukkonen after the final whistle has gone at the end of regulation. What does Tage Thompson do? He's not even in the frame. Watching the game on TV, he's off to the left. He's not even in the frame. He zooms in to the Sabres end, and he gets in Kastelik's face, pushes him up against the boards. There's no dropping of the gloves. The game's tied going to overtime, but he did the minimum. The minimum was, hey, that guy just slid the puck on my goalie after the whistle. I need to make sure that there is some response to that, even if it is just getting in the guy's face. Thompson did it. I think Thompson is one person that deserves credit for this as well. Not to say that it's, again, perfect at all, and there are not people on this team that have to do better, but I think there are a lot of important players on this team that do fine when it comes to this stuff. And I thought last night was another example of that. Greenway is one that you can trust him to stand up for teammates. The thing about Samuelson that I want to say in the negative from last night, and this is not what I just said about him kind of being someone we question about sticking up for teammates. I just continue to watch him and not get it. I just not get what is missing. What he's even supposed to do well for me. He is supposed to be defensively. if I were to tell you Samuelson figures out his game for next year, what do you think that would look like? You probably would think he's defensively sound. He's always in the right position. He's a great poke checker, and he's physical. That would be figuring his game out. Well, here's a play. Morgan Geekie, who the Bruins don't have many goal scorers on their team. He's one of them. He's second right now. He's the only guy above 20 goals other than David Pastrnak. And Samuelson finds himself too wide on his own blue line. You want to say communication issue with his defense partner at the time, whatever. He's in the wrong spot. He's too far over to the left if I'm Luukkonen looking out. My defenseman is too far left. So he recovers to the point where he's got that long stick and it's on Geekie. It's on his stick. So he is disrupting the shooter, keeping it from being a complete clean breakaway. So I think Luukkonen, we talked about this on WGO this morning with Owen Parker, Giant goalie son, played junior goalie, so he knows all the goalie stuff. And his defense of Luukkonen was that Luukkonen seemed to be playing that breakaway as though he thought Samuelson wasn't going to allow Geekie to get back to his backhand. And watching it back, I can understand that. I still think Luukkonen did a horrendous job. I think he was way too aggressive and found himself in no man's land when Samuelson couldn't make the play. So I would still put blame on Luukkonen, but I get that criticism of Samuelson. You've got a stick on him. You got to take one side away. Just let the goalie pick one side. You've got to take away one side. And from where he was at, that clearly was the forehand to backhand side, him pulling it to his backhand. And Samuelson's just not strong in his stick, which again is crazy because he's 6'5". Let me get his size right. I always say it's 6'5". I want to make sure that he's actually 6'5". His listed height, maybe it's actually 6'3". He is 6'4". Okay, so split the difference. 6'4", 227. How is a guy 6'4", 227 not stronger on his stick in that spot? So that's the one thing that just continues to bewilder me is what is going on here with this guy. So anyways, now let's take a break and let's get to the Bruins because I've got a lot to say on them. And I think you are looking at the complete and utter demise of the Boston Bruins going forward. And last night, I think you saw it. That when we come back here in the Locked On Sabres podcast. This episode of the Locked On Sabres podcast is presented by Upwork. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more. Experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. If you need help with marketing campaigns, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivers incredible results, posting a job free and simple, and within a day with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps find affordable, top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com and post your job for free. That's Upwork, UPWORK.com, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Today's episode of the Locked On Sabres is also presented by Game Time. There is nothing like watching live basketball. The energy of the crowd, the sound of sneakers on the hardwood, maybe even a celebrity sighting courtside. If you want to catch a game in person, and there are games within driving distance, if you're a Sabre fan in Buffalo, Game Time makes getting tickets easier than ever. Game Time's new feature, Game Time Picks, filters out the fluff and shows you only the best deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time scrolling through thousands and thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks even highlights super deals, gives you the best bang for your buck. You don't have to go searching for the best deals. With seat views before you buy, no surprise fees, and a lowest price guarantee, you can book with total confidence. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Sneaky Jody Biasi back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We're just going to sit back. Let's have some fun for a minute. You know, it's a lot of negative when you're thinking about this team and talking about this team because of the drought and the season's gone, last place still. One area where we might be able to have a little bit of fun is I'm ready to break out the champagne, the proverbial champagne, the cheap stuff. We're not going the expensive stuff. They're putting that over on the side for the day that the Sabres drought ends. But give me the cheap stuff to celebrate that the Bruins are dead. The Bruins are totally dead. I said this yesterday before the game, but it's so true that their days of being a contender are just totally over. They are totally, totally over. They have a very limited amount of offensive talent on their roster. Their blue line is thin. I like the goalie. I like Jeremy Swayman, but I don't like Jonas Korpisalo. Thought he had some tough moments last night. But even though I like Swayman's had a down year. He's had a pretty tough season without Linus Ullmark there riding shotgun. So you look at this team, and I don't know how it's supposed to get better. They're not particularly young. That's the other thing. When you look at what they put out on the ice last night, you see the roles. You see that Pavel Zacha, who is a fine player, but not a number one center, being asked to be their number one center. You see that Nikita Zadorov, fine player, does some nice things, big, physical, intimidating. He's playing number one defenseman for them. Not a number one defenseman. Not a guy that should be leading your team in ice time. And you look up last night, and 22-27 didn't lead them in ice time, because you know who did lead them in ice time on the blue line last night? And for the team, the Bruin that played the most minutes last night was Henry Jokiharju, a guy that couldn't get in the Sabres lineup this year for a giant stretch of time. A healthy scratch. Most minutes on the team last night. He played 3-on-3 overtime for them. Jokiharju did. I mean, Zadorov did too. Think of that. Zadorov is not a player you would ever imagine being in 3-on-3. He did almost score. Jokiharju in 3-on-3, though. Can you ever remember him playing 3-on-3 for the Sabres? Never. I can't remember it. I'm sure it happened once over the years, but not that I remember. He was not a part of that rotation. The Bruins just... Geekie is nice. Morgan Geekie is a nice player. He scores that power play goal last night. He plays over 20 minutes a night. I like Geekie. I think he's a good player. 23 goals on the year. Not a lot of assists, not a lot of playmaking. But even him, they got to figure out a contract after the year. He's a restricted free agent. I'm sure they will. He has his limitations. He's also not particularly young. So there's this big ceiling for him. He's already 26 years old. And that's part of the point I wanted to mention here is it's not just what their roster looks like right now. I don't see them getting any better. They don't have this deep pool of prospects, and who on the lineup right now is going to get better? Pastrnak is amazing. I don't have to even talk about him. Zacha, he's 27. He is what he is. Geekie's 26 is what he is. Elias Lindholm, 30 years old. Only downhill from here. Mason Lowery, 24. All right, maybe a little bit, but you're not drastically changing. Charlie McAvoy, who's kind of regressed a little bit at some points in the recent years. I think he's been good this year, though. 27. But he's a good player. Charlie Coyle at 32. Obviously not. Justin Brazeau, 26. I mean, to get to a player, here you go. Their top player on the year, the most points on the Bruins for a player that is under 24 years old. John Beecher has 11 points in 67 games. That's their top young player. Matthew Poitras, 11 points on the year in 33 games. Maybe he's somebody that could become that, but There just is not this high-end talent on the way. Nobody coming to save it. It's only going to get worse for the Bruins. And their numbers, they're kind of lucky to be where they are in the standings, honestly. This is why, I think I would predict next year the Bruins are a really bad team, bottom 5 in the NHL. You could argue they kind of already are that. They've just found some luck along the way that has had them a little bit higher in the standings. I mean, their goal differential is one of the worst in all of hockey. It's far worse than the Buffalo Sabres is. This year, goal differential in the Eastern Conference, they are minus 35. The only teams lower than them are Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. That's it. You look at some of their other numbers. Their 5-on-5 numbers specifically. And expected goals for percentage. Where do they rank in the league? 22nd. Corsi for percentage. Where do the Bruins rank in the league? 26th. Shot percentage. What percentage of the shots in a game do they get? 27th in the NHL. Their power play stinks. In fact, they are one of only 5 teams that have a worse power play percentage than the Sabres do this year. Boston at 14.9%. That's 29th in the NHL. You look at save percentage in the NHL this year. They rank 24th. It's incredible. Honestly, it's incredible that they're as close as they are to the playoff picture. It really doesn't, it defies logic. They get beat much worse than they win. They are bad on the power play. They're bad in goal. They don't have a lot of offensive firepower. I mean, Pastrnak leads the team with 83 points. The next closest is Zacha at 41. I don't understand how they have the record they do, honestly. I think it's completely faulty. 30, 30, and 9. It's they get to overtime a lot, right? They win a lot of one-score games, and the games they lose, they get blown out. And that kind of, I guess, is how you end up with being only 3 points out of the playoffs, despite being a bad team. But I think don't get it mixed up. The standings say that's a 500 hockey team. That's not a 500 hockey team. You saw it last night. The Bruins are bad. The Bruins are a bad team. The Sabres, think of it this way, and then we'll take a break. The Sabres missing Peterka, Kulich, and Norris, and being the worst team in the Eastern Conference this year. The odds before that game at FanDuel Sportsbook, dead heat. Minus 110, minus 110. It was a pick'em. The Sabres were on the road, missing a whole top 6 line. Brett Murray, first game of the year. He's on the 3rd line. And the Sabres were a pick'em. That is all you need to know about the Bruins. The Bruins are bad, and you're, I think, going to finally see it represented in the standings next year, even though we haven't seen it as much this year. When we come back, I want to talk about what Lindy Ruff had to say this morning about the Yuri Kulich hit. Go back to Saturday, and it's a good conversation about hitting in the NHL, and more particular, hits to the head. Lindy had an interesting take on this. I want to get to that when we come back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Stinky Joe DiBiase back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We will I'll have some bracket fun, by the way. I want to put something together. You got an idea for me? I've got 3. And I'm going to run with one of them unless I hear a better idea for a Sabre themed bracket that our listeners would have some fun with voting one versus the other. I've got 3 ideas that I like, but I'm open to someone beating me for a better idea. So let me know what you think. If you got a thought. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres, by the way. Sign up for a text club. A lot of fun going through that during games and, of course, trade stuff. And that'll be more in the offseason, but a lot of good stuff there. Injury updates. So talk to Lindy Ruff as I normally do on Tuesday mornings on WGR with Jeremy White. And we're talking to Lindy, and we're talking about the game last night. And I asked him about, I thought he gave a very good answer about the players sticking up for each other more recently and liking what he's seen since last month's New Jersey game. I also asked him about the hit on Yuri Kulik on Saturday and what his opinion of it was, given that the way I kind of set it up for him was it's a hit to the head. The guy doesn't leave his feet or even really raise his elbow, but it's a hit to the head. And Lindy kind of went off about it. And I thought was very smart about it and thought-provoking a little bit about the way the league treats a hit like that and maybe the ways that the game should change when treating a hit like that. Because going back to Saturday, there was no penalty on that hit. Yuri Kulik, he's in the corner. He's working it back up the half wall. And Brett Howden, he is covering the point man. He comes down from his man to hit an unsuspecting Kulik. And maybe that's a learning, curve for Kulik. I'm not blaming him at all. I might imagine the next time he's making that move up the wall, he might expect that somebody could blast him. There are guys in the league that are going to blast you. Not many, but there are guys, and Howden is one of them, apparently. So what is the responsibility, though, of the hitter in that situation when you do blast the guy in the head and he's down on the ice and his helmet comes off and he misses a game, probably because of a concussion, right? I don't know if that's out there official, but probably because of a concussion. And Lindy compared it to football. And I was actually mistaken the other day, covering the Bills and Sabres and how the league does these hits to the head. You think sometimes there's overlap and sometimes there isn't. And one thing I got wrong last week or on yesterday on this show was the idea that principal point of contact being the head will be a penalty. It should be a penalty. It's not automatically a penalty. And Saturday we saw an example of that. That in football, this is what Lindy kind of said. If you hit a guy in the head, it doesn't matter the context. You hit a guy in the head, penalty. To some degree, penalty. 15 yards. If it's really bad in the NFL, they throw him out of the game. In college football, they throw a guy out of the game for a lot less than if it's really bad because of their targeting rules. But they have cracked down on head hits. And they say, I don't care that you didn't lower your helmet. I don't care that you didn't hit the guy with, flying through the air and you just stood there and hit him. Whatever. You hit the guy in the head, you're getting a penalty for it. And the NHL does not operate that way. The NHL kind of asks these series of questions. Like, okay, did you raise your elbow? Did you leave your feet? Did you charge the guy? Did you run down from another spot and hit him? Did you have your stick up? Did you cross-check him? Question. It isn't just a blank slate or a blank sweeping statement of, did you hit the guy in the head? And what that allows for in the NHL, which shouldn't be that surprising because Gary Bettman continues to be the commissioner in sports, the one guy that still denies a connection between head hits, concussions, and CTE. He's the one guy that still refuses to do that. And I think it's mostly because of legal reasons, but that's what Bettman does. Bettman's being a lawyer, right? That same league is the one that allows for the possibility of a legal hit to the head. And to me, that shouldn't be the case. It should not be possible that hit on Kulik on Saturday doesn't draw a automatic penalty. You could call that soft if you want. I understand that. I'm not saying ban hitting. I love big hits. I love bone-crushing hits. If it's close, that's one thing, right? If it's you hit him shoulder to shoulder and the head also got affected by that, that's one thing. And I guess from what I'm saying, I am saying that should be a penalty too. This one, though, is just obvious, isn't it? The guy's head is the point of contact. His helmet is on the ice, and he's holding his head on the ice. That wasn't a hard one to figure out. He got hit in the head. When it's obvious like that, that is when it should be a penalty 100% of the time. And it wasn't. So as Lindy said, the league has to do a better job of protecting the players on stuff like this. And I do agree with him to some degree. I agree with him that they should be a little stricter about it. And That hit on Kulik on Saturday, whether it's by the rules now or whether they need to adjust the rule book, that hit's got to be a penalty. At least a 2, if not a 4 or a 5. And that's my stance on it personally. By the way, there was a report today that power plays are down in the league by a lot, and somehow scoring has remained the same, which I guess that's a good thing, isn't it? That power plays are down, scoring has remained, which means I've got more 5-on-5 scoring, which I think is a good thing for the game. I think you would want to say that's a healthy thing for the NHL. But the penalty stuff has been bad, and I can guarantee you by the playoffs it's going to be even worse. All right, that's going to do it for us, though, today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. The Sabres will next be in action on Thursday night, 9 o'clock in Utah. It's the Sabres' first ever trip to Utah. 9 o'clock puck drop, going head-to-head with the NCAA tournament. So for you Sabre fans, maybe Thursday night is a double screen night. And then Minnesota on Saturday, Winnipeg on Sunday, back-to-back afternoon games this weekend. So we'll talk to you tomorrow. We'll talk more about the Utah matchup. And, of course, more big picture stuff coming your way for the Sabres here on this show. So if you got a comment or a question, we'll do a mailbag portion of tomorrow's show. Twitter or our text club are good for that, so be sure to hit us up. And if you're looking for more of a league-wide perspective, whether it's the Ovechkin goal chase or maybe more on this scoring being power plays being down, other things, a lot of that stuff coming up with Locked On NHL. Check them out. Make them your second listen. The league-wide stories that matter with local coverage that you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. For us, we will talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.